A man was detained by the police and placed in the patrol car. However, his dog refused to leave him, always staying by his side. The officers discuss what to do with the dog, but it escapes and runs through the city. Following the animal, they discover something chilling. Before hearing this true account, remember to subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories. The sun was beginning to set in Oak Ridge Springs when Michael felt the handcuffs tighten around his wrists. His heart was racing, but not because of the situation itself. It was because of Zeus, his 5-year-old German shepherd, who was barking desperately around him as the officers tried to lead him to the patrol car. "Please, take care of my dog," Michael pleaded, his voice choked with emotion. Zeus, however, had other plans. When one of the officers tried to grab his leash, the animal dodged with impressive agility and ran towards the back door of the patrol car, scratching the metal with his paws as if he understood exactly where his owner was being taken. Sergeant Robert Johnson, a middle-aged man with over 20 years of experience on the force, had never witnessed anything like this. He observed the scene with a mixture of amazement and admiration as Zeus continued his persistent attempt to enter the vehicle. "Sergeant, what do we do?" asked the young officer Mark, clearly touched by the animal's display of loyalty. Robert adjusted his cap and scratched his chin thoughtfully. In his years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and something about this situation didn't seem normal. Michael Oliver, 35, a math teacher with no criminal record, lived a quiet life in the suburbs of the city. The case that was taking him to the station involved forged documents found in his house during an authorized search, but the dog's reaction piqued his curiosity. "Let him in," Robert decided, surprising everyone present. Sometimes animals see things that we humans can't. Zeus didn't wait for a second invitation. As soon as the door was opened, he jumped inside and settled next to Michael, resting his muzzle on his owner's arm, as if to say that everything would be all right. During the journey to the police station, Robert observed the interaction between man and animal through the rearview mirror. Michael kept his eyes fixed on the window, his handcuffed hands trembling slightly, while Zeus remained alert, his intelligent eyes alternating between his owner and the police officers. Upon arriving at the station, an unusual commotion caught everyone's attention. Several officers were huddled around the reception computer, discussing something with worried expressions. Chief Anthony Miller, a man known for his seriousness, hurriedly crossed the hallway. "Johnson, I need to talk to you," called the chief, but before he could continue, Zeus began to bark differently. These were no longer the distressed barks from before, but something more urgent, more determined. Taking advantage of the officer's distraction with the chief's arrival, the dog skillfully wriggled out of the hands of the officer, holding his leash, and darted towards the station's exit. "The dog is escaping," someone shouted. "No, he's not escaping," Robert murmured, observing the animal's behavior. "He wants us to follow him." And so began an unexpected chase through the streets of Oak Ridge Springs, with Zeus leading the way as if he had a very clear purpose in mind. The sun had already set completely, and the city lights were beginning to dot the forming night, creating an almost cinematic setting for what was about to happen. Michael, still inside the station and in custody, had no idea that his faithful companion was about to completely change the course of his story. Meanwhile, Zeus ran determinedly through the city streets, with several police officers in pursuit, guiding them to a discovery that no one could have imagined. Zeus raced through the dark streets of Oak Ridge Springs with impressive determination, while Sergeant Robert and his team followed in 2 patrol cars. The animal seemed to know exactly where it was going, making precise turns and occasionally stopping to ensure the police didn't lose sight of him. "He's leading us to the industrial district," observed Officer Mark, who was driving one of the patrol cars. The area, once prosperous, now housed various abandoned warehouses after the economic crisis that hit the city a few years ago. Zeus finally stopped in front of an apparently abandoned warehouse, its rusted metal structure contrasting with the few modern buildings around. The dog began to scratch insistently at a side door, his barks echoing down the deserted street. Robert got out of the patrol car and approached cautiously, illuminating the area with his flashlight. He noticed recent tire marks on the dusty ground and footprints going to and from the warehouse entrance. "Someone has been frequenting this place," he whispered to his team. With a search warrant quickly obtained, thanks to Chief Anthony's agility, the officers entered the premises. The interior of the warehouse revealed a surprising organization: tables with computers, sophisticated printers, and various documents scattered about. "This looks like a forgery center," commented one of the investigators, examining the papers on one of the tables. "And look at this," he continued, pointing to a folder with Michael Oliver's name on it. Robert opened the folder and found something disturbing. Documents detailing how Michael had been manipulated. There were photos of him being followed, records of recorded conversations, and even a meticulous plan to incriminate him. In one of the drawers, they found a USB drive that contained even more revealing recordings. Zeus, who hadn't left the officer's side, began to sniff intensely at a specific area of the warehouse. Behind some boxes, they found a safe. After managing to open it, they encountered more evidence, original documents that had been forged and placed in Michael's house. He was used as a scapegoat, Robert concluded, connecting the pieces of the puzzle. Someone planted those documents in his house and reported him to divert attention from the real illegal activities. As the forensics team began their meticulous work, Zeus remained alert, as if he knew his mission wasn't over yet. The animal occasionally looked at a door at the back of the warehouse, catching the sergeant's attention. "There's something more here," Robert murmured, following the dog's instinct. The door led to a smaller room, apparently an office. There they found a laptop still turned on, with open emails revealing an even larger plot. The messages showed communications between influential people in the city, discussing how to use Michael in their schemes. The teacher had been chosen for his impeccable profile, a model citizen with no criminal record, who volunteered on weekends to teach underprivileged children. They needed someone above suspicion, Robert explained to his team. And they found in Michael the perfect candidate to take the blame. Zeus, satisfied with the discoveries, sat near the exit, as if indicating it was time to return to the station and free his owner. His intelligent eyes seemed to say that he had known from the beginning that the truth needed to come to light. The news of the warehouse discovery quickly reached the station, where Michael was still waiting, anxious and confused. Chief Anthony, after receiving the first information by radio, was already beginning to prepare the documents for his release. Meanwhile, in the warehouse's evidence room, investigators continued to find more proof that not only exonerated Michael, but also pointed to a much larger scheme that needed to be unraveled. Zeus had done much more than save his owner. He had discovered the tip of a thread that, when pulled, would reveal secrets that many wanted to keep buried in Oak Ridge Springs. Back at the station, Michael could hardly believe it when Chief Anthony entered the interrogation room with a smile on his face and Zeus by his side. The dog immediately ran to his owner, jumping and barking with joy. "Mr. Oliver, you're free to go," Anthony announced, placing the documents proving his innocence on the table. "Your dog is a hero. He led us to the evidence we needed." Michael, still processing everything that was happening, hugged Zeus with tears in his eyes. "I always knew something was wrong, but I never imagined it would go this far," he said, stroking the animal's fur. Sergeant Robert, who had just arrived from the warehouse, interrupted the moment. "Mr. Oliver, we need your help to better understand this story. When did you start to notice that something was wrong?" Michael took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. "About 3 months ago, I started receiving strange emails from a supposed education department, asking me to sign some documents for a new social project. At first, it seemed legitimate." As Michael spoke, investigator Paula Thompson, a cybercrime specialist, was typing rapidly on her computer. "I found the emails," she announced. "They were sent through a ghost server, but they left traces. The most interesting thing," Paula continued, "is that these same email addresses are connected to other suspicious activities in the city, including some related to the Progress Foundation, that NGO that recently won the bid to manage educational projects." Zeus, who was lying at Michael's feet, perked up his ears upon hearing the foundation's name. The teacher's eyes widened. "Wait a moment. It was precisely that foundation that approached me to volunteer teaching on weekends." Chief Anthony began to make notes in his notebook. "The Progress Foundation has strong political connections in the city. Its president, Vincent Morgan, is very influential in the business world." "And that's not all," added Robert, leafing through some documents found in the warehouse. We found records of suspicious bank transfers between the Foundation and various shell companies. Michael, now calmer and beginning to understand the dimension of what had happened, remembered something important. In the last few weeks before my detention, I noticed I was being followed. Zeus would get especially agitated during our walks, always barking at a black car that passed by our street several times. Paula quickly cross-referenced the information on her computer. "We have security camera footage from your neighborhood, Mr. Oliver. I'll check if I can identify this vehicle." As the investigator worked, Zeus got up and began to sniff around the room, stopping in front of a bulletin board with photos of influential people in the city. His muzzle pointed directly at the photo of Vincent Morgan. "Impressive," Robert murmured. "It's as if he understands exactly what we're investigating." Chief Anthony picked up his phone and made a quick call. After hanging up, he turned to the team. "I just spoke with Judge Martinez. He authorized a broader operation. We're going to thoroughly investigate this foundation and its connections." Michael, still petting Zeus, asked worriedly, "What about my safety? These people clearly have resources and influence." "Don't worry, Mr. Oliver," Robert assured him. "We'll provide protection for you. And if I may suggest, I think Zeus should receive special training. He's demonstrated a natural talent for investigation." The dog, upon hearing his name, wagged his tail excitedly, as if he understood the proposal. Michael smiled, proud of his companion. He's always been special, but today he proved to be extraordinary. The night was already late in Oak Ridge Springs, but the investigation was just beginning. As Michael and Zeus finally prepared to return home, a new operation was being set up behind the scenes at the police station. The discovery of the warehouse was just the beginning of something much bigger, and that loyal dog had become a fundamental piece in unraveling one of the largest schemes the city had ever seen. A week after the events at the police station, Michael and Zeus were invited to a special meeting at the Oak Ridge Springs Fire Department. Captain Luke Fernandez, in charge of the K9 unit, had been impressed by the story of the German Shepherd that had made headlines in local newspapers. "Mr. Oliver, your dog has a natural gift," explained the captain as they walked through the training center. "We'd like to offer specialized training for Zeus. He could become an official rescue dog." Zeus walked beside them, his posture attentive and curious in the face of the various equipment and obstacles scattered around the site. Other trained dogs were performing exercises with their handlers, and the German Shepherd observed everything with evident interest. "But how would this work?" asked Michael, intrigued by the proposal. "I work as a teacher. I couldn't dedicate myself full-time to this type of activity." The captain smiled, already expecting this question. "Actually, Mr. Oliver, we have a special program for cases like yours. Zeus would stay with us during the day for training, and at night he'd return home. On weekends, you'd participate together in specific exercises." As they talked, Lieutenant Marina Sanders, a specialist in rescue dog training, approached with some equipment. "How about we do a quick test, just to see how Zeus does?" Michael agreed, and Marina prepared a simple search exercise. She hid an object with a specific odor among various obstacles, and, to everyone's surprise, Zeus found the item in record time, demonstrating an impressive ability to focus. "Extraordinary," exclaimed Marina. "He has a natural instinct for this. With proper training, he could become one of the best rescue dogs we've ever had." Meanwhile, at the police station, the investigation into the Progress Foundation continued to advance. Investigator Paula Thompson had discovered important connections through the digital records found in the warehouse. "Chief, you need to see this," Paula called Sergeant Robert, showing a series of documents on her computer. The foundation wasn't just forging documents. They were embezzling funds meant for educational projects. Robert analyzed the information carefully. And Michael was chosen as a scapegoat because he was involved in volunteer work with the foundation. They planned everything meticulously. At the training center, Zeus continued to impress the instructors with his natural abilities. Captain Luke explained that the official training would last 6 months, but that Zeus could start participating in simpler missions as soon as he completed the basic module. "Mr. Oliver," said Luke, "your dog has incredible potential. He could help in searches and rescues, locating people in rubble, and even in rescue operations in hard-to-reach areas." Michael watched proudly as Zeus performed another exercise, this time crossing an elevated walkway without showing any hesitation. "He's always been special," he commented. "Since he was a puppy, he's shown extraordinary intelligence." Lieutenant Marina approached again, now with a specific proposal. "We'd like to start training next week. Zeus would stay with us from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. On weekends, you two would participate in special training sessions together." As Michael considered the proposal, his phone rang. It was Sergeant Robert with news about the investigation. The conversation was brief but significant. The police discoveries were leading to a much larger scheme than they had initially imagined. "Captain," said Michael after hanging up, "I accept the proposal, but I need to make a special request. Zeus is still helping with an important investigation. Would it be possible to coordinate the training schedules with any police needs?" Luke smiled, understanding. "Of course, Mr. Oliver. In fact, this could be very beneficial for his training. The more diverse the experience, the better the development of his skills." Zeus, as if understanding that he was the subject of the conversation, approached the group wagging his tail. His gaze alternated between Michael and the instructors, demonstrating that same intelligence that had saved his owner days before. The afternoon was ending in Oak Ridge Springs with a sense of hope and purpose. Zeus, the dog who had unraveled a conspiracy, was about to begin a new phase in his life. A phase that would not only change his destiny, but also that of many other people who would one day need his help. The following months were filled with intense activity for Zeus and Michael. While the German Shepherd excelled in training with the firefighters, the investigation into the Progress Foundation took on new dimensions, revealing a web of corruption that extended through various sectors of the city. On a Wednesday afternoon, after another day of training, Michael was urgently called to the police station. Upon arrival, he found a meeting room full of investigators, including Sergeant Robert and cybercrime specialist Paula Thompson. "Mr. Oliver, we have important news," Robert began, his expression serious. "The Progress Foundation's connections go far beyond what we imagined. We've discovered links with construction companies, school meal suppliers, and even the mayor's office." Paula projected a series of graphs and documents on the room's screen. "Analyzing the financial records, we identified a pattern of suspicious transfers. The money intended for educational projects was being diverted to offshore accounts." Michael observed attentively, still assimilating the magnitude of the scheme. "And where do I fit into all this?" he asked, intrigued. "You were the perfect piece," Robert explained. "A respected teacher with no criminal record involved in volunteer work. By incriminating you, they would divert the authorities' attention to a false culprit, buying time to erase their tracks." At that moment, Zeus, who was accompanying Michael, began to bark insistently at one of the documents projected on the screen. It was a photo of a Progress Foundation meeting, showing Vincent Morgan, the president, alongside other important figures from the city. Paula, intrigued by the dog's reaction, enlarged the image. "Wait a moment," she murmured, focusing on a detail in the background of the photo. That's the same black car that was following the teacher." The discovery caused excitement in the room. The vehicle, almost imperceptible in the corner of the image, was the missing proof directly linking the Foundation to the attempt to incriminate Michael. "Zeus, you're amazing," exclaimed Michael, petting the dog. Sergeant Robert couldn't help but smile, once again impressed by the animal's abilities. As the team discussed the next steps of the investigation, Michael's phone rang. It was Captain Luke from the fire department with urgent news. "Mr. Oliver, we need Zeus immediately," said Luke, his voice tense. "There's been a landslide in the mountain region. We have missing people, and Zeus has already completed the basic search and rescue module. He could be crucial in this operation." Michael looked at Robert, who nodded understandingly. "Go," said the sergeant. "The investigation will continue here. Zeus can make a difference out there now." In a matter of minutes, Michael and Zeus were on their way to the disaster site. The scene was devastating. Destroyed houses, fallen trees, and dense mud covering much of the area. Firefighters and volunteers worked tirelessly, but time was against them. Captain Luke received the pair, quickly explaining the situation. "We have information about a family trapped in the rubble of a house. The equipment can't detect vital signs due to the density of the debris. Zeus is our best chance." Michael looked at his faithful companion, who was already on alert, sniffing the air. "Are you ready, buddy?" he asked, receiving a determined bark in response. With protective equipment in place, Zeus was guided to the search area. His recent training proved valuable as he skillfully navigated the obstacles, focused on his mission. After several minutes of intense searching, Zeus began to bark and dig frantically at a specific point. The firefighters quickly mobilized, using equipment to carefully remove the debris. To everyone's relief and emotion, they found the family, parents and 2 young children, alive, protected by an air pocket formed by the rubble. Zeus's precision had been crucial in locating them in time. As the rescue team worked to safely remove the victims, Michael watched Zeus, proud and emotional. His dog, who just a few months ago was just a faithful companion, was now a hero twice over, first by saving him from an unjust trap, and now by saving an entire family from tragedy. The day ended with a mix of emotions. The joy for the lives saved contrasted with the seriousness of the revelations about the corruption scheme in the city. Michael knew that the challenges were far from over, but with Zeus by his side, he felt prepared to face any obstacle that came their way. As they returned home, exhausted but fulfilled, Michael reflected on how drastically his life had changed in such a short time. The investigation, Zeus's training, and now this successful rescue, all of this formed a new chapter in their lives, full of purpose and meaning. The weeks following the rescue in the mountain region were filled with intense activity for both Michael and Zeus. The success of the operation had caught the attention of local media, and the story of the teacher and his hero dog quickly spread throughout Oak Ridge Springs and beyond. On a sunny Saturday morning, while Michael and Zeus were participating in a special training session at the fire department, the teacher's cell phone rang insistently. It was Sergeant Robert, his voice filled with urgency. "Michael, I need you and Zeus to come to the station immediately. We've had a major breakthrough in the investigation." Upon arriving at the police station, they found a scene of commotion. Officers were running back and forth, phones were ringing incessantly, and at the center of it all was Robert, with deep circles under his eyes but a gleam of triumph in his gaze. "We secured a search warrant for the Progress Foundation headquarters," Robert explained, guiding Michael and Zeus to a room filled with boxes and documents. "What we found there goes far beyond what we imagined." Investigator Paula Thompson, seated in front of several computers, looked up from the screens. "Mr. Oliver, your case was just the tip of the iceberg. We've uncovered a corruption scheme that extends across several cities in the state." Zeus, always alert, began to sniff the boxes scattered around the room. His behavior caught Robert's attention. "What is it, boy?" "Found something," asked the sergeant, observing the dog with interest. Michael, now accustomed to his companion's sharp instincts, approached the box Zeus was indicating. "He always knows when something is important," he commented, opening the container. Inside the box, they found a series of documents that at first glance seemed irrelevant, but Zeus insisted, focusing on a specific folder. Paula, intrigued, took the folder and began to analyze its contents. Her eyes widened as she read. "This is incredible. These are records of secret meetings between Foundation members and high-ranking politicians. We have evidence here of bribes, illicit agreements, and—" She stopped abruptly, looking at Michael with an expression of shock. "Mr. Oliver, there are specific mentions of you here. It seems your incrimination was part of a much larger plan." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of plan?" he asked, his voice trembling. Robert took the documents from Paula's hands, quickly reading them. "Apparently you weren't chosen at random. Your spotless reputation and volunteer work were key pieces in a large-scale scheme to embezzle educational funds." "But why?" Michael inquired, still confused. "Because you were about to discover something," Paula explained, connecting the dots. "Your volunteer classes were having a real impact on the community. This threatened to expose that the Foundation's official projects were actually fronts for money laundering." Zeus, sensing his owner's tension, approached and rested his head on Michael's leg, offering silent comfort. "It doesn't stop there," Robert continued, leafing through more documents. "We found evidence linking the Foundation to a network of influence peddling that extends to the state capital. We are talking about a scheme involving millions of dollars." As the team continued to analyze the new evidence, the room's phone rang. Robert answered, his expression changing from surprise to determination. "I just received information," he announced after hanging up. "Vincent Morgan, the Foundation's president, is trying to leave the country. We have to act fast." Michael looked at Zeus, who was already on alert, as if he understood the gravity of the situation. "How can we help?" asked the teacher. Robert thought for a moment. "Actually, you two could be crucial. Morgan is hiding in a rural property on the outskirts of the city. The location is vast and well protected. We need Zeus's tracking ability to find him." "But isn't that dangerous?" Michael questioned, concerned. "You'll have full support from the tactical team," Robert assured. "Besides, Zeus has already proven to be more than capable in high-pressure situations." Michael looked at his faithful companion, who returned the gaze with determination. He knew this could be the chance to definitively end the nightmare they had been living through for the past few months. "We're in," Michael decided, petting Zeus's head. "What do we need to do?" As Robert began to outline the action plan, Michael felt a mixture of apprehension and determination. The journey that had begun with an unjust accusation was about to reach its climax, and he knew that with Zeus by his side, they were prepared to face any challenge that lay ahead. The sun had barely risen when the operation began. Michael and Zeus were in the back seat of a police car, accompanied by Sergeant Robert and 2 officers from the tactical team. The convoy moved silently along the rural roads, leading to Vincent Morgan's property. "Remember," Robert instructed, "our priority is to locate Morgan. Michael, you and Zeus must follow the tactical team's directions at all times. We don't want to take unnecessary risks." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. Zeus, by his side, remained alert, his intelligent eyes fixed on the landscape passing by the window. Upon reaching the vicinity of the property, the vehicles stopped. The team disembarked silently, and the tactical operation leader, Captain Oliveira, approached with a map of the area. "The property covers about 500 acres, he explained. "There are several buildings scattered across the terrain, including a main mansion, barns, and even a small hangar. Our intelligence indicates that Morgan may be preparing to escape by helicopter." Michael petted Zeus, preparing him for the mission. "Ready, buddy?" he whispered. The dog responded with a soft bark, as if he understood the importance of the moment. The team split into smaller groups to cover more ground. Michael, Zeus, Robert, and 2 tactical officers formed a unit, heading towards the barn area. As they advanced across the terrain, Zeus began to show signs that he had picked up a scent. His behavior changed, becoming more focused and determined. "He found something," Michael murmured to Robert. The group followed Zeus, who led them along a winding path between the trees, moving away from the barns and approaching a denser area of the property. Suddenly, Zeus stopped, his ears perked up, body tense. Before anyone could react, they heard the sound of breaking branches, and a figure emerged running from the dense vegetation. "It's Morgan!" Robert shouted. "Stop!" The suspect, seeing himself surrounded, abruptly changed direction, running towards a nearby ravine. Zeus, without hesitation, darted after him, with Michael and the police officers in pursuit. The chase led them to a dangerous area, with the terrain becoming increasingly steep and unstable. Morgan, desperate, didn't realize he was dangerously approaching the edge of the ravine. "Watch out!" Michael shouted, seeing the imminent danger. At that moment, the ground beneath Morgan's feet gave way. He slipped, desperately clinging to the edge of the ravine, his feet dangling over the precipice. Zeus, who was closer, stopped at the edge of the cliff, barking furiously. Michael, arriving shortly after, quickly assessed the situation. "Hold on!" he shouted to Morgan, lying on the ground and extending his hand. "Grab my hand!" Morgan, fear etched on his face, hesitated for a moment before releasing one hand to reach for Michael. Zeus, understanding the gravity of the situation, grabbed the sleeve of Michael's shirt with his teeth, helping to anchor his owner. With a joint effort, and with the help of the police officers who arrived moments later, they managed to pull Morgan to safety. The man, panting and trembling, looked at Michael and Zeus in disbelief. Why did you help me?" he asked between heavy breaths. "After everything I did," Michael, still catching his breath, replied, "because it's the right thing to do. Justice doesn't mean revenge." Robert, approaching with the handcuffs, said to Morgan, "Vincent Morgan, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." As Robert read Morgan his rights, Michael hugged Zeus, burying his face in the animal's fur. You were amazing, buddy. Once again, you saved the day. The rest of the team arrived quickly, securing the area and beginning to collect evidence. On the property, they found a significant amount of incriminating documents, cash, and even a helicopter ready for takeoff. As they were escorted back to the police vehicles, Michael reflected on the incredible journey he and Zeus had been through. From a simple teacher and his pet dog, they had become key pieces in unraveling one of the largest corruption schemes in Oak Ridge Springs history. The sun was already high in the sky when they left the property. Michael looked at Zeus, who was resting peacefully beside him in the back seat of the police car. He knew that regardless of the challenges that were still to come, with his faithful companion by his side, he was prepared to face anything. 6 months had passed since Vincent Morgan's capture. Oak Ridge Springs had changed significantly during this period. The operation that dismantled the Progress Foundation's corruption scheme had repercussions that extended far beyond the city limits. On a sunny Saturday morning, Michael and Zeus were walking through the Central Park, now renovated and full of life. Children played, families had picnics, and in the center of it all a new statue stood, the figure of a man and a dog, symbolizing the partnership that had changed the city's fate. "Hello, Mr. Oliver," called a familiar voice. It was Mrs. Cecilia, an elderly lady Michael knew from his volunteer classes. "How's our canine hero doing?" Zeus wagged his tail, recognizing the admirer. Michael smiled, patting the animal's head. "He's great, Mrs. Cecilia. In fact, we just got back from another training session with the firefighters." "How wonderful!" she exclaimed. "You know, since this whole story came to light, things have really changed around here. The new educational programs are making a real difference in children's lives." Michael nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and gratitude. The fall of the Progress Foundation had paved the way for a complete overhaul of the city's social and educational programs. Now the money was actually reaching where it should. Continuing their walk, Michael and Zeus arrived at the main square, where a small crowd had gathered. In the center, they recognized Sergeant Robert, now promoted to lieutenant, giving an interview to the local TV station. "And thanks to the joint work of the police, the community, and of course our unexpected heroes, Oak Ridge Springs has become an example of transformation and transparency," Robert was saying to the camera. Seeing Michael and Zeus, Robert gestured for them to approach. "And speaking of them, here they are, Mr. Oliver and the incredible Zeus, the catalysts of all this change." Michael, still not entirely comfortable with the attention, timidly greeted the reporter. Zeus, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease in the spotlight, sitting majestically beside his owner. "Mr. Oliver," asked the reporter, "how do you see Oak Ridge Springs today after everything that's happened?" Michael thought for a moment before answering. "I see a city that has learned the importance of citizen vigilance, education, and partnership between people and institutions. But above all, I see a community that has discovered the power of hope and joint action." The interview continued, with Michael sharing his experience and the lessons learned. He spoke about how adversity can bring opportunities for growth and how loyalty and perseverance, exemplified by Zeus, can overcome even the most difficult challenges. After the interview, Michael and Zeus headed to the fire department, where a special ceremony was being held. Captain Luke greeted them with a broad smile. "Welcome," exclaimed Luke. "We're about to graduate another class of rescue dogs, and we couldn't do it without our inspirations." The ceremony was moving. New dogs and their handlers received certificates, ready to serve the community. Zeus, now an honorary member and special instructor, participated actively, demonstrating search and rescue techniques to the newcomers. At the end of the event, the mayor of Oak Ridge Springs, elected after the fall of the old corruption scheme, took the stage for a special announcement. "It is with great pride that I announce the creation of the Zeus program," he said to applause. "A project that will expand rescue dog training and at the same time, offer animal-assisted therapy for children in vulnerable situations." Michael felt tears in his eyes as he heard the announcement. What had begun as an injustice against him had transformed into something much larger, something that would benefit countless lives. At the end of the day, back home, Michael sat on his porch, Zeus lying at his feet. Watching the sunset, he reflected on the incredible journey they had traveled. "You know, Zeus," he said, stroking the animal's fur, "when all this started, I thought we were alone against the world. But we discovered that, in fact, the world was on our side. We just needed to give it a chance to show that. Zeus raised his head, his intelligent eyes fixed on Michael, as if understanding every word. "Thank you, buddy," Michael continued, his voice choked with emotion. "For never giving up, for teaching me the true meaning of loyalty and courage. Together we not only changed our lives, but transformed an entire city." Zeus gave a soft bark, as if agreeing, and rested his head on Michael's lap. There they stayed, man and dog, contemplating the horizon and the infinite possibilities that the future held. Oakridge Springs had been reborn, stronger and more just. And at the heart of this transformation was the story of a teacher, his faithful canine companion, and the incredible journey that had proven that with love, courage, and perseverance, even the most impossible challenges can be overcome. 5 years had passed since the events that transformed Oakridge Springs. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, the Central Park was packed. Families, children, and pets gathered for a special event, the inauguration of the Michael and Zeus Community Center. The imposing building, constructed where the headquarters of the defunct Progress Foundation once stood, symbolized the radical change the city had undergone. Its glass walls reflected the blue sky, and at the entrance, a golden plaque briefly told the story that everyone there knew by heart. Michael, now with a few gray hairs at his temples, stood on the stage set up in front of the new center. By his side, Zeus, a bit older, but still with a lively and alert gaze, sat proudly. The crowd eagerly awaited the inauguration speech. "My dear friends and neighbors," Michael began, his voice echoing through the speakers, "5 years ago, we faced one of the greatest challenges in our community. But today, we're not here to remember the difficulties. We're here to celebrate what we've built together since then." He paused, looking affectionately at Zeus before continuing. "This center is more than just a building. It's a symbol of our resilience, our unity, and our ability to transform adversity into opportunity." Michael then detailed the various programs the center would house, from tutoring classes to professional training, including a free veterinary clinic and, of course, a training center for rescue dogs. In the front row, familiar faces smiled. The now Police Chief Robert, Fire Captain Luke, and even Vincent Morgan, who, after serving his sentence, had dedicated himself to community work, seeking redemption. The Zeus program, which started as a small project, now extends throughout the state, Michael continued. Hundreds of trained dogs, not only for rescues, but also for assisted therapy, changing lives every day. Zeus, as if understanding he was being mentioned, gave a soft bark, drawing smiles from the audience. "But the true legacy," said Michael, his voice slightly choked, "isn't the programs or the buildings. It's the lesson we learned together, that loyalty, compassion, and courage can overcome any obstacle." As Michael spoke, screens around the park showed images from the past 5 years. Zeus participating in rescues, children learning to read in the new library, former inmates being reintegrated into society through training programs. "Oakridge Springs has become a model for the country," Michael concluded. "Not because we're perfect, but because we've learned to face our challenges together with honesty and determination." At the end of the speech, to enthusiastic applause, Michael and Zeus cut the inauguration ribbon together. The community center opened its doors, and the population entered, eager to explore the new space. Later, when the crowd had dispersed, Michael sat on a park bench, Zeus lying at his feet. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in golden and pink hues. "Look at this, buddy," Michael murmured, stroking Zeus's head. "Who would have thought that terrible day when I was unjustly accused would lead us here?" Zeus raised his head, his wise eyes fixed on his owner. "You know," Michael continued, "sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been there with me. If you hadn't followed me to the police station, if you hadn't led us to that warehouse." In response, Zeus gently licked Michael's hand, eliciting a laugh from the teacher. "Yeah, I know. There's no point in thinking about what-ifs, right? What matters is what we did with what happened to us." At that moment, a young woman approached timidly, holding a book. "Excuse me, Mr. Oliver," she said. I wanted to thank you. Your scholarship program changed my life. I just graduated in veterinary medicine, and Well, I hope one day I can give back, making a difference like you did. Michael smiled, genuinely touched. The merit is yours, young lady. All we did was give an opportunity. You did the hard work. After the young woman walked away, Michael looked once more at Zeus. See, partner? That's why we do what we do. Every life touched, every dream realized. That's our true legacy. Zeus gave a bark of approval, and together man and dog watched the last ray of sunlight disappear on the horizon, knowing that tomorrow would be another day full of possibilities and lives to transform. The legacy of Michael and Zeus would continue to inspire generations, reminding everyone that with love, courage, and perseverance, even the smallest actions can trigger waves of change that transform entire communities. Night was falling over Oak Ridge Springs, but the city was far from falling asleep. The lights of the new Michael and Zeus Community Center shone like a beacon of hope, illuminating the surrounding streets. Inside the center, a special meeting was taking place. Representatives from neighboring cities had come to learn about the Oak Ridge model as the set of policies and initiatives that transformed the city became known. Michael, accompanied by Zeus, led the presentation. The secret isn't in grand heroic gestures, he explained. It's in the small daily actions, in mutual trust, and in the active participation of every citizen. As he spoke, Michael couldn't help but reflect on how the change had spread far beyond the city limits. The Zeus program was now a national reference in training dogs for rescue and assisted therapy. Several cities had adopted similar programs, creating a support network that extended throughout the country. Michael and Zeus's story had inspired a series of children's books about ethics, citizenship, and the importance of friendship between humans and animals. These stories were now part of the school curriculum in many schools across the state. The model of transparency and citizen participation implemented in Oak Ridge Springs after the Progress Foundation scandal had caught the attention of researchers and policymakers. Case studies about the city's transformation were discussed in universities and international forums, but perhaps the deepest and most lasting impact had been on people's mindset. The story of a man and his dog, who together challenged injustice and inspired an entire community, had become a powerful symbol of hope and possibility. After the meeting, Michael and Zeus walked to the room that housed the Second Chances Gallery. There, the walls were covered with photos and stories of people whose lives had changed thanks to the programs implemented in recent years. Former inmates who were now successful entrepreneurs, young people who escaped drugs and crime through sports and educational programs, elderly people who found new purpose as volunteers. Each story was a living testimony to the power of transformation. Michael stopped in front of one particular photo. It was of Vincent Morgan, the former president of the Progress Foundation, now coordinator of a rehabilitation program for people involved in white-collar crimes. "Look at that, Zeus," Michael murmured. "Who would have thought that even our greatest adversary would become an ally in building a better future?" Zeus gave a soft bark, as if agreeing. At that moment, Michael's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Robert, now the State Secretary of Public Safety. "Michael, I need your help. We're planning to implement the Oak Ridge model on a statewide scale. Can we talk tomorrow?" Michael smiled, quickly typing an affirmative response. The journey, it seemed, was far from over. As they left the center, Michael and Zeus were greeted by a group of children participating in an evening reading program. "Mr. Oliver!" "Zeus!" they shouted in chorus. "Tell us again how you saved the city." Michael laughed, sitting on a nearby bench. The children settled around him, eyes shining with anticipation. Zeus lay at Michael's feet, always attentive. "Well, children," Michael began, "our story starts on a day like any other, when a man and his dog discovered that sometimes, to do the right thing, you need to bark against injustice. And so, under the starry sky of Oak Ridge Springs, the story was told once again, a story that continued to inspire, to teach, and to remind everyone that the power to change the world often begins with an act of loyalty, courage, and love. The seeds planted by Michael and Zeus continued to germinate, not just in their city, but in hearts and minds across the country. And as new generations grew up hearing their story, the promise of a more just and compassionate future was renewed, one bark at a time.